Hello, 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 and welcome back to Puerto Rico Life. My name is Jeffrey Holst, and in this video, I'm going to reflect on just over 3 years of regular commuting back and forth to Puerto Rico. So, on March 26th of 2021, so it's April 29th now, so 3 years and 1 month ago, 37 months ago, I posted a video on this channel, the very first video that I ever posted on this channel, which said, "Shh, don't tell my wife I'm moving to Puerto Rico." Um, Apparently, that wasn't the best strategy, but whatever. I sent it to her before I posted it, before I made it public, and the two of us decided that we were, in fact, going to move to Puerto Rico, and that really was the plan. We were going to move to Puerto Rico. We were going to experience all of the culture. We're going to make new friends. We're going to do fun stuff. We're going to do scuba diving. We're going to do exploring the island, going to the rainforest. And a lot of that stuff I have actually done. So I can't say that I regret the decision at all. But the consequences of that decision were a little bit surprising. It didn't turn out exactly how I thought. My now ex-wife and I decided to move, and ultimately we sold our house. We got an apartment in Puerto Rico in Isla Verde. I've done videos about that throughout this life of this channel, and I continue to post about that. But she didn't end up moving with me for personal reasons of her own. And as a result of that, she is now my ex wife. Not because I wanted to move to Puerto Rico. In fact, I was willing to stay back, but there were other things going on that made it so that we needed to make a major life change after nearly 20 years of marriage. But anyway, that caused me to shift what I was planning to do slightly. So instead of moving to Puerto Rico, um, completely and spending a very limited amount of time in Chattanooga. I was always planning on keeping an apartment in Chattanooga, but the general idea was ex-wife is going to stay in Puerto Rico. I'm going to spend a week per month doing business related activities here in Chattanooga. I'm in Chattanooga right now, in fact. Um, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time in Puerto Rico with the wife. But as I said, that didn't work out. So here we are. We're still on really good terms, and I have nothing bad to say about her. So it is what it is. But that being said, my experience in Puerto Rico has been different than what I expected. But now, 37 months in, I have gotten the apartment in Puerto Rico. I continue to pay the rent monthly. I was in Puerto Rico yesterday, in fact, for my birthday, and I'm going to be posting a video about that. I recorded some content about the birthday party and a rum tour that we did and some other fun stuff we did. So that'll definitely be forthcoming in the next few weeks. But anyway, I wanted to give you my thoughts on how it's been commuting to Puerto Rico, because that's really what I've been doing. Last year, let me check this out here. I actually track my days. You know, there are some tax advantages to living in Puerto Rico, but there are, it turns out, some tax disadvantages to living in Puerto Rico too. So if you're not part of the ultra wealthy class, if you're not making a huge amount of money, it might not make sense for you to live in Puerto Rico. And as a result, I've actually chosen to avoid establishing residency there, and I continue to be a resident in Puerto Rico or in Chattanooga. And so, what I've actually done is I created a day tracker. Unlike other people, I track how many days I have been in Puerto Rico so that I make sure I don't cross over the 183 magic number. So as of right now, I've been 67 days this year. So we're 4 months in. That's a little bit over half. And there are some reasons which I'll get into in a few moments in this video. Some things that I have going on in Puerto Rico that are really exciting. That might make it so that I've decided to become a resident this year, and so this year might be the difference. But last year, for reference, I spent 156 days in Puerto Rico. So about 25, 30 days short of half the time. And the year before it was something similar. I don't actually have my tracker from that year readily available, but 156 days last year. And like I said, you know, whatever that number was, 60 some days this year in Puerto Rico. So now, after 3 years of time in Puerto Rico, I've probably spent about 365 days, so approximately 1 year of my life actually in Puerto Rico. Um, I've obviously was going to Puerto Rico before that. So just by way of background, my ex-wife and I went to Puerto Rico first on our honeymoon back in 2002. Um, we went to Puerto Rico for the first time, and we made several trips to Puerto Rico over the years. And during COVID, I was itching to travel. I've always been a big traveler, and a friend of mine was going through a divorce at the time, and the two of us decided to take a weekend in Puerto Rico. And this is late COVID, middle COVID, I don't know, some period in COVID where there were still curfews in Puerto Rico, but if you had a vaccine card, you could go into restaurants and bars. You had to wear masks, at various places. But it was the world was starting to open back up. I mean, we had a 10 o'clock curfew then, which meant everything closed at like 8 p.m. And we went to stay at the Caribe Hilton. Now, I love the Caribe Hilton. One of the reasons I love the Caribe Hilton is actually because of this view that I had from my room at the Caribe Hilton. That's literally the view looking out of the room at this little fort. And I drive by that fort when I Uber from Isla Verde to Old San Juan, or if I drive. From Isla Verde to Old San Juan, or if I take the scooters, like I made a video about that recently of taking the scooters from Ocean Park to Old San Juan. But I mean, I drive by that fort regularly, and every time I see it, sometimes even when I fly over from the air, if I happen to be on the left side of the plane, when I see that fort, that's when I know I'm home. That's the quintessential, even though it's a small, minor, fort, it is the one that makes me remember why I'm in Puerto Rico and why I love Puerto Rico. And there's this weird phenomena that happens every time I land in Puerto Rico. I instantly feel happier, and every time I'm taking off, I instantly feel just a little bit less happy. And so that's why, like this weekend, even though I only had a few days, I flew into Puerto Rico on Friday and back on Sunday, so less than 36 hours in Puerto Rico, because I wanted to spend my birthday in Puerto Rico, because I have great friends there and I've met some amazing people. Some of these people are here for tax advantages. Some of them are doing interesting technology plays, or they're creating businesses that provide services to the United States. But a lot of the people that I've met, and some of the best people that I've met, are just local Puerto Rican people that work at bars and restaurants, people that are Uber drivers, people that work at the grocery store, the gas station near me. These people are some of the best people I've met, and also just people that I've met just from hanging out in those places. Regular customers, people that live in my building, people that live down the street, and then there's this whole other cohort of people that are like me, and they go to Puerto Rico because they love Puerto Rico. My friend Todd's a great example of that. So Todd, I met at a cigar lounge in Old San Juan, and since then we've started not one but two separate businesses together in Puerto Rico. Todd is on his, I guess, his third or fourth business in Puerto Rico, but he moved during COVID time as well, slightly before I first started going to Puerto Rico for extended periods of time. Him and his girlfriend Krista just decided that they wanted to reestablish their lives in Puerto Rico, so they worked out a plan to buy a sailboat, a catamaran, and they run a charter sailboat company called Blue Doubloon Charters. Blue Doubloon Charters has a boat in Fajardo and has another boat in San Juan Bay. And both of those trips are amazing. And I've spent a ton of time with them over the last few years. I invested a small amount of money to help them get their initial operating capital together. And I've been paid really, really well from them over the last few years. And then a little while after that, say about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, Todd started talking to me about this idea that he had to build catamarans in Puerto Rico, because there's this thing called the Jones Act, and the Jones Act is it is it's a complicated law, and there's a lot of positives and negatives, and I've heard lots of arguments on both sides. But the short version of how it impacts um, the charter sailboat market is, it basically says that all U.S. Sailing vessels, not sailboats per se, but boats in general, things that travel across water for commercial purposes, have to be manufactured and crewed in the United States. So they need U.S. U.S. crew, and they need to be manufactured in the United States. And most sailing catamarans are not manufactured in the U.S. In fact, there are no, to my knowledge, no existing operators of creating sailing catamarans, 50, 60-foot big catamarans to sail for the charter market exclusively in the U.S. Now, there are plenty of manufacturers of those boats, and that's why, like in like Aruba or anywhere else, name it, you can do sunset sails on these big boats. But those boats aren't manufactured in the U.S. They're manufactured in South Africa or France. And as a result of the Jones Act, which is designed to protect the U.S. shipbuilding industry, those are not eligible to be used. You can do some things with limited capacity, like 6 passengers, maybe 12 passengers in some cases, but they're not eligible for broad commercial uses. Like if you want to put 50 people on a sailboat, that's just not an option because there's not a U.S. product. There's maybe some custom made boats out there, so there may be one here or there. I don't want to get into all the details of that, but he started talking to me about the idea of building those boats for the market because he can buy them. So he thought, like, let's look into what it looks like to build these boats. And so we spent a ton of time, and I actually think I'll probably interview him here on this channel at some point where we can dig into it more. But for 18 months, we've been negotiating with the government. We've been looking for land. We've been working on seeing if this is something that makes sense. In the middle of that period, we decided also to roll out our own cigar line. So we now have a Puerto Rican hand-rolled cigar called El Bastion. And El Bastion is hand-rolled in Rio Grande using a Puerto Rican Corojo for the filler. It does have a Dominican wrapper and a Dominican binder. We're just not able to source locally the tobacco leaves that we need for that, but we're working with a local farm with the idea of them growing what we need so that we'll be able to make a pure Puerto Rican cigar. We've also been granted permission by the United States government to import those cigars to the United States. We're working to get some states to approve it, and soon they may be available in your local cigar store. So the things that we've been doing in Puerto Rico, like, yes, I've been commuting back and forth, but I've been building these relationships with people. And I'm really excited about the future of the shipyard, building catamarans. We've actually identified and secured a piece of land in the port in Ponce. So the Port Authority in Ponce has actually set aside a piece of land for us where we can build a manufacturing facility to build these sailboats. So that's something that we're making good progress on. I mean, it might be 2 years before we drop the first boat at this rate because it's a long, detailed process and something that we want to get right because we're building these boats not just for Todd and for Blue de Bloom, but for the world, for the other people in the United States, people in Hawaii, people in South Carolina that want to run charter sailboats in U.S. waters are going to be able to utilize these boats that are made with a diesel hybrid engine, but mostly sailing and water drives to charge the batteries. They're going to be made in Puerto Rico, which is considered U.S. waters. For those who aren't familiar with the unique status that Puerto Rico has, it's another complicated thing that I've been learning about as I've been there, and there are positives and negatives to that as well. I believe the Supreme Court actually ruled on this and said it's a pertinent territory of the United States that Puerto Rico belongs to, but is not a part of the United States. So it's a very interesting thing. They have their own Olympic teams, right? So, Puerto Ricans can join an Olympic team from Puerto Rico and compete for their own nation at the Olympics, but they're American citizens. And if they move to the United States, they have all the same rights and obligations as any other American citizen. And likewise, by the way, if any non-Puerto Rican native person moves to the island of Puerto Rico, they have the same rights and the same citizenship as any other Puerto Rican might have. Now, they may have some differences in how they're treated, particularly when it comes to Act 60, Act 20, Act 22, which are tax codes that are designed to bring in mainlanders, mainly because one of the unique features of the Puerto Rican tax code and the situation with the United States Supreme Court is that, they are U.S. citizens. They do not have representation in Congress. They have a non-voting representative, a single non-voting representative. They are not allowed to vote in presidential elections or any federal elections. However, they are allowed to vote in primaries, so it's very complicated, right? But they do, as a result of this sort of separate parliamentary system that Puerto Rico has, they are not taxed by the United States federal government in the same way. So income earned in Puerto Rico is actually exempt from U.S. federal income tax for U.S. citizens, which is a very unique situation. Now, you do have to be a U.S. citizen residing in Puerto Rico. I talked about how I don't reside there currently, although maybe I do. I don't know. I haven't really figured out whether I live there this year or not, but I definitely did not live in Puerto Rico last year. This year, I may end up living there. I may not. We'll see. It might depend on how much progress we make on the shipyard, because the shipyard is going to require more and more of my time. I'm going to spend more and more time in Puerto Rico working on that, and it'll be clearly any income that's derived from that will be income sourced in Puerto Rico, and I'm not sure that I want that to be taxed by both Puerto Rico and by the United States federal government. So I may end up having to live there just for that reason alone. But that's going to be an amazing project. We're going to hire, initially dozens of local Puerto Rican people, and we're going to train them to manufacture sailboats. We're going to bring in sailboat builders from around the world to train those people, and those are going to be high paying jobs relative to the local economy in Ponce. So I'm very excited about that. And one thing I have learned is that going back and forth to Puerto Rico, one thing that I've learned from that is that it is there's a lot going on. There's a lot of amazing things happening. There's a lot of challenges, though. There's a lot of population decline that occurred over the last 50 years. As a result of that, there's a tremendous amount of vacant property. There's residual issues from Hurricane Maria. In Ponce, there's issues from Maria and also from the earthquakes that they experienced at that same time. The combination of all that stuff, Maria being a once in 150-year storm, a gigantic, probably the only Category 6 storm ever to hit. They don't actually have a Category 6 rating, but I mean, they had sustained winds of north of 180 miles an hour. There were giant windmills where the wind turbines were sheared off by the wind, and those are designed to handle wind, right? So and a direct hit from a storm of that magnitude, and it never happened before, and hopefully it will never happen like that again. But I mean, the power was destroyed, and since then they've privatized their power grid. They've built up a lot of new, redundancy in the system, and as a result of Maria, there's some real positive things that are happening now. The power grid, for example, right? It is much better than it has been for a long time, but I mean, there are challenges with that too. There are local Puerto Rican people that lost their jobs because the government decided to issue the contract to Luma, which is the local power company now. And so there are, again, positives and negatives. It's like this all through Puerto Rico. There's so much juxtaposition, and it's such a beautiful island with the only tropical rainforest in the United States. El Yunque, one of my favorite places, and I've made tons of video content about that. You should definitely, peruse the other videos on this channel and check that out. And then you have Culebra with one of the best beaches in the world, and you've got 3 out of the 5 bioluminescent bays in places like Fajardo and Vieques and La Peguera. 3 out of 5 bioluminescent bays in the world, right? Like in Puerto Rico. That's amazing when you think about it. The biodiversity of Puerto Rico is amazing. I think I read or heard 17 different types of the local coqui frogs, which in and of themselves are amazing. A tiny little, the size of a nickel, and they make a sound that you can hear from like 100 yards away, and it sounds like coqui. That's why they call them coqui frogs. They're like coqui. I'm definitely not a frog impersonator, so that's not exactly right, but that's really like kind of how it feels. Anyway, so what are the challenges that I've faced? Well, one thing I will say is, like, I highly recommend you visit Puerto Rico, and there are huge advantages. My friend Harry Dent, who's lived in Puerto Rico for a number of years now, once told me that San Juan is the only first world country in the Caribbean, or city in the Caribbean. I'm not sure I agree with that entirely, but he does make a valid point that unlike most of the Caribbean, San Juan and the greater Puerto Rican island um, have resources that you don't have elsewhere. Only single digit percentage from tourism. The majority of the GDP of Puerto Rico is not from tourism. You have things like Home Depot. You've got things like Costco, Sam's Club, IKEA, English language movie theaters. You can get by pretty well with English in San Juan. I made a video years ago where I said I needed to learn Spanish, and I've been working on it, but that process has been slow. In part because I haven't put enough focus on it. I had personal challenges and things that distracted me from it, but I do feel like I'm making progress, little by little, un poco y poco, or something like that, right? But I definitely need to learn more Spanish. Let me see if I can say that. We're demonstrating my Espanol here. So, um, yo necesito más español, something like that. I think, no, yo necesito aprender más español, or something like that. I don't know, but I mean, it's somewhere around there. Necesito meaning I need, and aprender meaning to learn, and then más more, and then español, Spanish. So I think that's probably close at least. And I'm able to hear the words in a way that I couldn't before when I first arrived in Puerto Rico. And Puerto Ricans speak very quickly. I rarely could even understand that they were making words. It sounded like random sounds, like this. And now I can hear most words, and I can understand 20, 30% of, maybe even 40% of what's going on around me. Especially if people slow down a little bit and talk when they're talking to me, which people are, really, really good about doing that. And the people, oh my gosh, the people in Puerto Rico are some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, I'm talking like, I've met people that are, fourth, fifth generation Puerto Ricans. I met people that are, they can trace their heritage back to before Puerto Rico was Puerto Rico. I've met people that just moved to Puerto Rico, but I mean, even just yesterday, I was talking to an Uber driver whose parents were from Puerto Rico. His mom was born in Camuy. His dad was born in Ponce, but he was born in I think he said Southern California or something like that, or maybe it was somewhere else in the U.S. But he was born in the U.S. He lived in the U.S. most of his life, and he was, I would guess, in his mid-50s, and he'd been in Puerto Rico now for 4 years. He moved to Puerto Rico because he wanted to reattach himself to his heritage. And that's one of the things that I think is quite nice about Puerto Rico. There are millions of Puerto Ricans living in the US because lots of people for years were encouraged to go to the US and get jobs. There are good economic incentives for that. There are actually more Puerto Ricans, native, ethnic Puerto Ricans living in the United States than there are in Puerto Rico. About 3 million people living on the island. The vast majority of them, ethnically Puerto Rican, some Dominicans, and then, of course, some people that have come for tax advantages or tourism or just fell in love with the island like me, or whatever reason. But the majority of them ethnically Puerto Rican. But even that's a confusing term because of the history of the island, right? So you have the local Taino native population blending with conquistadors, people that were conquering the island, the Spanish, mixing in slaves from Africa, and it all blending together to produce a unique culture, and then having the United States sort of step in and take over, as like the Supreme Court said, someone that a country that owns Puerto Rico. I guess there's really no better way to say it. I mean, and that creates cultural challenges, but it also creates opportunities for Puerto Rico because the Puerto Ricans can go to the U.S. They're U.S. citizens. They use the U.S. dollar. They get the stability of it, and one of the reasons they have things like Costco and Sam's Club and IKEA and industry and stuff like that is because they have this unique relationship with the U.S. So again, positives and negatives. It's always about balancing it. Puerto Rico is a very complicated place, and after spending almost half my time for 3 years there, I can say that I'm just beginning to uncover what it is like to live in Puerto Rico. Now, there have been challenges that are unrelated to Puerto Rico as well. It's very expensive to keep 2 apartments. And I'm really seriously considering the possibility of moving to a cheaper apartment in San Juan somewhere. I'm in Isla Verde on the beach, and I pay more than what I probably have to for rent because I wanted that lifestyle. But now that I've been there a few years, and I recognize that, like, I can go to the beach when I want. If I live a block from the beach, I can still go to the beach. Now I don't get to see the beach as much, right? But I mean, if I can save $1,000 or $1,500 a month in rent, which I could, um, might be time to consider that as well, because it is expensive flying back and forth. I mean, I do, like, it's not like I go for 5 months and then I come back for 7. It's I spend 5 months there, but I spend 2 weeks at a time. So I'll be there for 2 weeks and gone for 3. There for 2, gone for 3. Flying almost every month, or like this weekend where I flew just once for the weekend. And I flew with my girlfriend, so it was like my girlfriend and I both flying to Puerto Rico and back in 36 hours. And we had a couple of my other friends flew down for my birthday party as well. But I mean, that's an expensive hobby, right? Like, and then keeping an apartment in Chattanooga. And I did pretty cheap here, but I mean, I also have my office here and my business here. And so I can't completely separate myself from Chattanooga either. And as a result of that, I've been spending, a lot of time commuting, a lot of time, a lot of money commuting, but it's been good. And if I were going to summarize all of this after 37 months of seriously considering moving to Puerto Rico, I'm still seriously considering moving to Puerto Rico. I love Puerto Rico so much, and I wanted to make this video so that people could hear my unfiltered thoughts about Puerto Rico and about the things that are going on there. And I mean, obviously, I just barely touched the surface, but um and if people want to hear more, feel free to, like, ask in the comments questions. And if you put those questions down in the comments, I'll try to make additional videos answering those questions for you. uh what it's like to fly to Puerto Rico. Like, the one that's a great question if someone were to ask that. But the short version is really easy. It's like a domestic flight in the US. You don't go through customs. You don't need a passport. Um, so there's advantages there. I mean, it's a lot easier. I can leave my apartment in Chattanooga and I can be in Puerto Rico in less than 6 hours, gate to gate, one apartment to the other. And that is really nice. But in order to do that, I have to pay more, better schedule, more expensive flights, better airlines, more expensive flights. So, it's a balancing act. But I would encourage anyone who's watched the video this far to, ask additional questions in the comments, like I said, but also, like, go visit Puerto Rico, check it out, see what you think. It's an amazing island with great beaches, with great snorkeling, with great diving, with great waves, windsurfing, surfing, kite surfing, parasailing, rainforest, bioluminescent bays, turtles, sharks, coral reefs, all the offshore islands, amazing as well. The rainforest. I mean, there's just I could go on and on. And also some great food, amazing rums, amazing local delicacies, the pork highway, the queso frito, which is a personal favorite. Is probably why I haven't lost any weight since I've been living in Puerto Rico, because I love that fried cheese. But which is not like you're thinking. If you haven't tried it, it's something that I've never been able to replicate outside of Puerto Rico. But in Puerto Rico, it's quite amazing. It's not like a mozzarella stick. It's a completely different experience. It's salty, chewy. But also has a sweet element because they dip it in a sweet guava sauce. It's quite amazing. I mean, and then there's the pork can, and then the local fishes, the red snapper, the whole red snapper, um, but also there's this, like, eclectic mix of foreign influence cultures. You can go to places with, like, foreign fusion, Korean, Puerto Rican restaurants, and amazing ramen, and I mean, there's just so many great places. Then you have Viejo San Juan, a 500-year-old city, one of the a walled city with amazing history. The Ponce de Leon house, Casablanca, El Moro, San Cristobal, two amazingly beautiful forts. The walls, the exterior of the wall, walking down La Princesa, one of the most beautiful nighttime walks I've ever experienced. I mean, it's just there's just so much going on. It's actually kind of ridiculous how great it is. And so I would definitely recommend it. And like I said, if you have any questions, just ask them in the comments below or shoot me an email. I always have the email address in the show notes. And if I can answer your question, I'm happy to do it. So anyway, that's all I got for right now, guys. But I look forward to sharing more about Puerto Rico. I've been thinking a lot about it. I wrote this book a while ago called No Bad Days: How to Make Every Day Great. And it's sort of my life story up until about 3 years ago. So it ends right before I decided that I wanted to be spending way more time in Puerto Rico. But I'm writing now about my life. Again, I'm writing another chapter essentially in that book. And, we were very fortunate with that book because it was an Amazon bestseller. It was the number one new release in personal finance the day that it came out. I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And that's, really, really great experience. But I really want to write about Puerto Rico, and I've been writing about my life, and a big chunk of my life involves spending time in Puerto Rico and talking about the people that I've met in Puerto Rico. And so, yeah, I mean, I love it if people ask me questions or introduce me to cool people that are in Puerto Rico because as I continue to write and flesh that new book out, I'm realizing that it is probably going to be a book about my experience in Puerto Rico almost more than anything else. And um, man, I've had some amazing experiences in Puerto Rico, and I've met the best people and done the coolest things. And I mean, I feel like I'm just touching the surface. So I really, really, truly look forward to being able to share that all with you. So yes, please feel free to reach out. And as always, try to live the best version of your life. Try to be happy. Give up bad days. I have the Last Life Ever brand where we talk about how to live the best version of your life. And my partner in that, she lives in Rican, Puerto Rico. We actually did a video about her house and pool before, which is a great video. You can definitely check that out. So you can see what's going on in Jillian's life, and you can check out Last Life Ever. But yeah, I mean, I highly recommend you, you follow me wherever you can. Look for, just Google Jeffrey Holst. You'll see me talking about real estate investing. You'll see my Instagram. You'll see jeffreyholst.com. I'm working on a project I call the Billion Good Days Project, where I'm working to create 1 billion good days in my lifetime. So keep an eye out for that as well. So many great things going on. But as I said, this is Puerto Rico Life. So I'm going to talk mostly about Puerto Rico. I love you all. Thanks so much for watching to the end of the video. And if you have any questions, just leave them below.